Good evening, all the participants. I would like to call Mr. Karunanidhi sir, Senior Vice President, Alembic Pharmaceutical Limited, to introduce our honorable speaker, Dr. Atul Saxena sir. Over to Mr. Karunanidhi sir.
Yeah, good evening, one and all. It is a great opportunity to mingle with all of you in this online platform. Almost a month that we have done our last web series. So now this new normal scenario, because of this COVID outbreak and this lockdown, has given an opportunity for us to conduct many such webinars. So many eminent speakers are participating and giving a lecture in our Alembic webinar series. So today, Dr. Atul Saxena is a professor and head of Department of Animal Reproduction and Gynecology and Obstetrics, College of Veterinary Science and Animal Health, Animal Husbandry, Mathura. He is with us. So I take this opportunity as a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Atul Saxena and his academic background in this occasion. Dr. Atul Saxena is born on 4th April 1964 and did his graduation in the year of 1988 and post-graduation in 1991 from College of Veterinary Science, Chandrasekhar Azad, University of Agriculture and Technology, Kanpur. He holds ICAR Junior Research Fellowship for pursuing Masters in OG. His keen interest for teaching, research and extension work has encouraged him to join College of Veterinary Science, Kanpur as an assistant professor in Department of Animal Reproduction, Gynecology and Obstetrics in the year of 1992. Based upon his experience and his ability for better teaching, he has been promoted as an associate professor in the year of 2001. Further, his subject knowledge, leadership capabilities and ability to lead from the front, in addition to his experience, made him to lead the post of Professor of Animal Reproduction at the College of Veterinary Science, Kanpur in the year of 2008. Dr. Saxena is actively engaged in teaching and extension work with sincerity and devotion for 28 years. He is holding a position of Director of Research of the university since 2010 till today. He is invited for framing policies and expert opinion in the field of animal reproduction by the Government of India, particularly in artificial insemination, sexing of semen, reproductive aspect of the large animal. His research experience, it is very, very important to highlight that is more than 22 years of his research experience in cow, buffalo reproduction, bull reproduction and obstetrics has given some of the highlights. Introduction of early pregnancy diagnosis through use of ultrasonography, extensive utilization of sonography at the field level, that is up to farmer's doorstep. Not in college, it's a farmer's doorstep, he was doing it. And he also developed a fully functional semen cryopreservation lab that is functioning since 2009. And he is an expert in handling all form of fetal monstrosity in large animals. Dr. Saxena is handling many projects sponsored by various government and institutions. He has successfully completed a project conservation of large ruminant breeds, particularly Haryana and Badavi animals, employing technique of artificial insemination. So that project outlay was 2.25 crore. So created a complete facilities for cryopreservation of semen with creation of semen biology lab. So currently, an ongoing project sharing a responsibility as a principal investigator of the institution developing a program for ICAR National Agriculture Education Project funded by World Bank. The financial outlay is 23.75 crore. So his As I mentioned earlier, his research interests are in the area of clinical gynecology and obstetrics in ruminant fertility. He has 68 papers published in leading journals of national and international repute, 6 manuals, also guided 34 MUSc and PhD students to complete their courses during their academic studies. Also organized one national conference, 4 seminars, and more than 30 training sessions. So because of his so many such contributions, he has received many awards like Chancellor's Silver Medal for securing second position amongst successful candidates, Best Teacher Award twice in his career, Certificate of submitting maximum stories talks to the ETV of UP for educating the farmers and livestock owners. So we are all very, very fortunate to have such a knowledgeable person, a multi-dynamic personality to enrich our scientific knowledge and guiding us today's academic presentation. I welcome Dr. Atul Saxena for this wonderful program, and all the participants, please participate. And if you have any questions in the during the course of the presentation, please type your questions. Our PMT members are noting down your questions. After the session is over, the important questions will be asked today itself, and Dr. Saxena will be able to answer after his presentation. Over to Dr. Saxena. Sir, once again, thank you. Welcome, and please start your presentation, sir.
Thank you, and very good evening to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Karunanthi, for giving an introduction of my career and giving me an opportunity and a platform so that I can highlight some of my knowledge on the topic. Friends, almost 28 years I have been in this career, and since 28 years we have been thoroughly devoted, and particularly my major experiences in the large ruminant itself. So today I'm sharing with you my knowledge on a topic which is really of importance nowadays as far as female infertility is concerned. I recapitulate you when you are sitting in a clinic or you are attending some meeting, you must have often heard many things regarding there is a problem, dairy sector is not in economical conditions, AI is not in a good shape, there is more and more number of animal being culled. So this type of remarks we often heard in meetings, in various platforms while interacting with people. And there is no doubt in it that yes, we have made an achievement in terms of milk productions, but on the other hand, this is also true that there is an increase in the percentage of infertility in the system. Besides, there are many things which are responsible for fertility, but whatever the issue which we are raising it today is really an important issue from the female point of view. So without wasting any time, and as Mr. Karunanthi said, that we welcome all your questions. So I will appreciate if I get a response from all of you for your active participations. So without any delay, I introduce my topic to you all. I hope now the screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we will discuss today postpartum uterine infections, how we will able to diagnose it, and how we will able to treat it. This is nothing new. There is nothing new in this topic. The only things which perturbed me as a professor and head of the department after attending so many meetings and things is that still what I find is that we lack in a proper defining the way of postpartum infection. That is very important. Unless and until we define a uterine infection properly, then it's not possible that we will able to treat it properly. Secondly, is that a little of knowledge, just by knowing that this is pyometra or this is metritis, this is endometritis, does not serve, which I think. So on that basis, I prepared my talk for today. Let us begin with the presentations. In the early postpartum period, the most frequent disorder is a uterine infection. You must have handled many cases of retention of placenta, many cases of dystocia. You must have seen twins birth also. You must have seen many of the metabolic disorders of the animals also. And they are, what are the contributing factors of all this is that once an animal suffer with this problem, then ultimately animal will had a sequelae of a uterine infection. Now, how to correctly define a uterine infection, that is important. So the risk factor for a uterine infections are dystocia, retained fetal membrane, twins calving, prolonged calving. Whenever there is a prolonged calving, even then you had a retention of placenta. Whenever you have a metabolic disorders, which is very common. Hygiene. Even we have seen that in the calving areas where the animal calve, how good or how bad they are. So that also reflects, and this is important, and this has been highlighted. Although it has been categorized under low risk factors, but it contributes a lot. All these risk factors, they makes an animal 6 times more prone for uterine infection as compared to a normal calf animal. That is the beauty. This itself, my first slide itself has given you an enough idea of the problem, because I know that whosoever is attending today must have attended many number of cases of retention of placenta, many cases of dystocia, many cases of metritis, many cases of pyometritis, take many cases of metabolic disorder. If such is the incidence and the things are so common, then it is not difficult that we will say that this problem is not a complicated one. This problem is a complicated one, and this exists in the systems this exists in the infertility program to a larger extent. Principally, we categorize uterine infection into a metritis, a septic metritis, and a puerperal metritis, which happens in the immediately postpartum period. Then as we progress further, or say 3 weeks postpartum, we may have an endometritis also, and it has been categorized as clinical endometritis as well as subclinical endometritis. Clinical endometritis is the factor which you can see, which is visible. But even a clinical endometritis where discharge is of a scanty amount, which do not comes out traveling from uterus to cervix to fornix, the vagina and the vulva, then it also becomes a difficulty for us. Okay. Then the biggest problem is subclinical endometritis. No visible sign. Animal will also come in heat. You go on inseminating it, and you fail to make a conceptions without knowing the cause. You say, okay, everything is okay, discharge is also clear. Okay. Today, even I received a call from one of my students, and he says, sir, my biggest problem is that in the early postpartum period, I am not getting pregnancies. My system is not getting a pregnancy. I said, okay, you just go with my talk today and you will learn later on, and subsequently even we can talk and discuss on these things. I hope you will get answer of your queries in this talk. Then pyometra. These are the critical uterine infections. This is an amalgamation of various reports, which I have not put it here also, that what is the incidence of the problem. You may have as low as 30%, 5%. Pyometra is very less. But if you go and see with the subclinical endometritis condition, it ranges from 9 to 76%. Now you can itself very well get an idea of the things that how important it is to deal with the subclinical case of endometritis. The things which are visible to us, we treat it. The things which are visible, which are not visible to us and apparently things normal, we don't treat it and we left it as such, and goes on. Of course, there is a spontaneous cure. There is a spontaneous recovery, but we cannot afford for a spontaneous recovery because it takes too long a time. And every day of extension in a infertility in an infertility pays from an owner's pocket, pays from a dairy pocket, and that counts too much. We have not gone into the economic analysis so far, but roughly, when I used to interact with farmers while having extension programs in the fields, then I just used to say, "Okay, Baba, how much amount you spend on your cow for feeding?" So there's a 10 kg of simple wheat straw, a little bit of concentrate, and if we count just on these two factors even itself, a 10 kg of straws today is costing you more than 60 rupees. A half kg of concentration, if somebody is giving, it will cost you 20 rupees. So it almost 100 rupees just on these two factors. Besides, we ignore how much the amount of milk which we lose. We have not added the labor which the person doing on it. We didn't add the housing system in which the animal is locating, and owner has made some substantial amount of amount from his pocket to have a shelter for his animal. We agree with this fact that yes, we are not in an organized sector. The dairy is not in an organized sector, and it is difficult in handling individual persons to person. That is the biggest thing. But even then, we should not let lose ourselves, and we should work on treating the things which comes across with us. This is a very good figure depicting your, which will make you clear how a disease occurs at what period. If you see in the early postpartum period, you have a metritis. And subsequently after 2 or 3 weeks after the postpartum period, you may have an endometritis, which may last long. And this is accompanied with subclinical endometritis also. And you have normal endometrium also. So what I mean to say is, we understand that there is a problem, there is a shortage of feed and fodder in the system. And every extension in the day of added to infertility is costing us a much. We also know, and every one of us knows who is a veterinarian, that we had a slogan in our gynecology, calf a year. Means we should have a calf every year, but this is not possible at all, and this is not possible in our system even. But why can't we have it on 13 months? Why can't we have it on 14 months? If it is buffalo, you can add 1 more month, because there is a difference in gestation period of cows and buffalo. So 13 to 14th months of period, if we restrict it. Carving interval is still a problem in the systems, that everywhere, every meeting you go, the problem is that, okay, you restrict the carving interval. You make the animal pregnant. You take a challenge and you do it. You accept a area and you started doing the programs involving the field veterinarians. These are the challenges with us. And by this figure, you must have an idea in your mind how the disease progress, If we go with the incidences of clinical endometritis, because metritis is visible, you may not have a cycle, you start treating it. As soon you find there is a problem, you start treating it. We will discuss later on how we will approach for treatment, because treatment aspect is also very important. Clinical endometritis, if you see, as per these authors, which has been named in front of you, because they are the pioneer persons who worked extensively in the field of uterine health, particularly to the large ruminants. And what their studies says that they have a clinical endometritis right from 10 to 20%. Whereas the subclinical endometritis, it ranges with 37 to 47%. And this is a system which is an organized system. This is a system which more number of data, at least if you go with the papers of these persons, then at not less than 200 animals they have. If they have presented a paper on uterine health or uterine problem, then they have not evaluated less than 200 animals. That is the biggest things, and their data is so bulky and so extensive that I just wanted to give them a I just wanted to put it in front of you so that you can see that in an organized system, in a good system, even you have 47% of subclinical endometritis. Let us think it in our system. What are the consequences? If you have a uterine problem, if you have a uterine infection, what are the consequences of it? Consequences is, if it is clinical endometritis, you have infertility because you don't breed it. But if it is a subclinical endometritis, then it is called as subfertility. Subfertility means you breed it, you didn't get the results, or you get some which is not significant. So this is the problem, that in subclinical endometritis, we goes on attempting, and ultimately when a spontaneous recovery comes after 4 cycles, 3 cycles, now you think of 3 or 4 cycles. 20 into 3 is 60, 20 into 4 is 80 days. Who can afford a 60 days or 80 days? A non-pregnancy of 60 days or 80 days. It spoils everything in the economy. So in subfertility, if we have a clinical endometritis, you find some discharge there. Okay, you start treating it, you get a recovery, and you just ignore. Just ignore means ignorance because you don't have an idea. I suppose so. And we just ignore it. Yes, this is okay. The discharge is clear. The animal looks normal. Let us go. Let us breed when it comes in Easter. But even then, those animals, many of the papers, thousands of papers, thousands of things suggest, yes, you have a subclinical form of endometritis, which is very extensive in these systems, and it leads to subfertility. So what will happen? The reproductive consequences of all this thing is that you have a delayed resumption of cyclicity. You have a prolonged postpartum luteal phase. We will discuss this later on. Postpartum luteal phase, prolonged postpartum luteal phase. What happens? This is as per the information of Leblanc, that 20% less conception rate. And I think that is the answer for Abhishek even. Okay. And if you breed and you are not getting it, your system is having a subclinical endometritis too. calving to conception intervals prolonged for 30 days, and there are cullings. Because ultimately, what will happen if the animal not bred? Then you just throw it out from the system. Okay. So overall, it is a delayed involution. It is a delayed postpartum estrus occurrence. It is increased number of service per conception. It is an increase in the calving and interval. It is a decrease in the milk production. And ultimately, the answer is you are culling an animal. Why early postpartum period is more vulnerable? हम लोगों ने देखा होगा, सुना होगा, but we have not think it so seriously what I feel so. Because in the early postpartum period, there are substrate, a huge amount of substrate in the forms of tissue debris, remnants of placenta, blood. These are all present, and these are all the substrate for the growth of bacteria. Plus, animal is also in parturition stress. She will take less feed, and less feed is also weakening the systems of defense system of an animal. We have a compromised physical barriers. Think of the status of vulva, which is the first doorstep for protecting the uterus. Think of a cervix, which is also not completely closed. If we see next 72 hours, if we take 4 days, 5 days even. There is a suppressed immune system. Whatever the rise in progesterone and estrogen, which initiate a process of parturition at the terminal stage, that makes defense system of the animal a weak one. And this is a natural system. But we also know that it is not that every normal parturate animal strap into the conditions of condition of metritis or endometritis or clinical endometritis. So it means who get trapped into the systems. Let us discuss with this also. But the rise in progesterone during the during the parturition stage, during the pregnancy, and the extensive rise in estrogen, which triggers for parturitions. Okay, these all make immune systems weak. Plus, whenever you have some pathogenic organism inside the uterus, they also produce certain things. And recently, by metagenomic studies, people say earlier Escherichia coli was known to be an opportunistic pathogen of uterus. But now the concept after metagenomic studies is nothing but analysis of on the basis of the fluid which we take it out from the uterus, and we study the proteins which we match with the various microfloras which are present in the system. And what they say is there are so many Escherichia coli, so many strains of Escherichia coli is present. They present in longer period. They produces LPS, lipopolysaccharides, which is also very dangerous, which also makes the immune system of the animal weak. These things are going on. So now the question is that we know that the early postpartum period is very vulnerable for infection because of the things that there is huge amount of substrate, because of the things that there is breach in the barriers, because of the things that there is a compromise in the immunity also, the self-immunity also. Even then, who picks up the infections? A study said that every animal is having in the early postpartum period a lot of bacteria. But we also know that there is a term lochia. Cleansing mechanism automatically comes into the systems, and this cleansing mechanism is just to throw it out from the uterus, reducing the bacterial load inside it. Okay, then despite the cleaning mechanism, why some animals get trapped into the system of infection, uterine infection? Because those who are not able to clearly pass out lochia in full amount, and still some is left, or in other words, we can say that good amount of substrate is present inside it, and we have a more number of bacterial load inside, and with a weak uterine defense system, then such animals, they becomes trapped for. If you see study before 2000, 2003, 2004, people used to study the uterine culture by just uterine infection by just culturing it. But subsequently from 2005 onwards, you started getting papers of metagenomic studies, which is a more giving you a broad picture of the microflora, which you cannot culture it properly. So whatever the virulent strain they are present inside the uterus, it is Trupperella pyogenes, Fusobacterium necrophorum, and Prevotella melangiococcus. This is as per the culture study reports. But when metagenomic analysis comes, then they say there are not this, there are many more, and I am not going to name it. They are in front of you. And there are many subtypes of these organisms which are present inside it, and they are considered as pathogens. So we just want to say that yes, the uterine atmosphere is prone for growth of organism, defense system is weak, and if the system gets further risk in forms of any pathologies like retention, like difficult carving, like improper hygiene, they adds to the things. Not only this, even if an animal which is normally carved, everything goes in a normal way, normal discharge of lochia, even then such animals, they are trapped with uterine infection. And the biggest thing also lies here that this group of bacteria, ये कहते हैं ना 2 और 2 4 वाला हिसाब है इनके संग, they work in synergistic. The product of one favors the other's growth, and so is with this group of T. pyogenes, Fusobacterium, and Prevotella species. Okay, whatever the substances they release, they support each other. I just only say this thing, and they weak, and whatever the substance which are released, they makes the immune system, the primary defense system of the uterus, a weaker one. Now, just a quick overview of the how does disease occurs. The pathogenic organisms, they adhere to the mucous membrane, colonize there, penetrate, release toxins, and they causes the disease. Then when they cause the disease, then how the tissue react with it. If any organism which is attached to the endometrium take a innate immune response, the self-immune response of the body, they comes into play, and there are TLR cells, thick toll-like receptors. I don't want to go into depth of any of the things because I know the interest of peoples which we are with us, and when these things are being recognized, the infection is being recognized, cytokines and chemokines and antimicrobial peptides are released, and they attract the major hamara defense system, which is macrophages and neutrophils. This neutrophils, they are not to the potential what they will be if there is no infection inside them. Means whatever the neutrophils, they are coming to the system for defense. If the uterus is infected with virulent strains of pathogens which we have seen, then their efficiency is definitely lower down, and this brings rise to the condition of infection. What happens to this on the ovarian response? Because all of you have seen, whenever there is a uterine infection and you started treating it, you also find it that there is an indirect involvement, that there is an increase in the milk yield. Okay, and whenever you say yes, if there is any gross uterine pathology, you don't expect a cycle to occur. This is also true. Okay. So what will happen? If there is a uterine disease, there will be no effect on FSH level. And this has been thoroughly been proved that a cycle starts, a wave starts 7 to 10 days postpartum period. But GnRH and LH hormone, they are being affected. And as a result of this, whatever the dominant follicle size, which also have compromised in nature, that they don't go to that extent of dominancy, which we expect, the size of a follicle are not to that extent, which is required to give you a good ovulatory one. Or in other words, if I say if 11 millimeter follicle ovulate, then on a 13 millimeter follicle ovulates, there is a 2 millimeter difference. And whatever, because after ovulation, what will happen? This ovulatory follicle will form a luteum, a corpus luteum. And this corpus luteum secretes the progesterone. And this progesterone, definitely, people, you must have studied luteal dynamics. You must have read many of the papers of luteal dynamics. What does this say? If the size of the corpus luteum is small, means if it is a small follicle which ovulates, then the progesterone being secreted by this structure is low. So if the progesterone is being secreted by this structure is low, definitely it will also hamper the process of prostaglandin synthesis from the uterus. Further, if there is at all a pregnancy, then with the suboptimal progesterone concentration, it will not establish inside. And we have an early embryonic death. And that is why, if you are having a very good conditions even, and if you are, say, you are perfect in insemination, you have a good semen, you have a good experience, if you are giving 100 good animals with you, then you don't get them pregnant in first instance, all the 100 animals pregnant. And this story also suggests to you, yes, some inside problems is there, and this automatically gets rectified. So what I mean to say, what is happening at the follicular level is that under the conditions of infections, we have follicles which will grow, but the level of LH will be low because of the level of the pulse release of GnRH is low. And when the pulse release of GnRH is low, the LH is low also. And then you had not if desired follicles which will ovulate. So that is why we say reduced ability of dominant follicle to ovulate. Reduced size as well as lower estradiol production. This is a reduced size. All of you must have an idea of this thing also in your mind, because those who have passed from the last 6-7 years, I think they must have a pretty good concept of follicular dynamics and what is happening with the size of the follicle and the relationship of estradiol production. The lower the size of the follicle, the lower is the estradiol production. Higher will be the size of follicle, the higher will be the estrogen production. This is invariably a nomenclature which is being followed. But in case of pathogenic organism present inside the uterus, the aromatase activity of a follicle is affected. You must have seen two cells, two gonadotroph concept of production of estradiol production, of steroid hormone production. And whenever there is an LPS, means E. coli is producing lipopolysaccharides, which is a form of toxins, you can say. Okay. And this, they affect the aromatase activity. People even have reported it into the follicular fluid. The LPS is present in the follicular fluid also. They affect the aromatization process. And once the aromatization process is affected, production of estrogen is less. Estrogen induced LH search will be hampered. You may have a follicle which may not ovulate. You have a estrus, but you don't have a follicle which will ovulate. And when you say all these things, then you say, what is the fate of the follicle? The fate of the follicle is that it will undergo ovulation. It will not go under the ovulation. It will go into size and it will not undergo the process of ovulation and forms a cyst. These are the things which we all have in our mind. Suppose if a dominant follicle ovulates under the infective conditions, which happens in clinical endometritis, even in subclinical endometritis, then they produces low of progesterone. They will lead to an early embryonic death, and we may have a failure in conceptions. Quickly brushing you with the defining, I will not wait. Whatever the classifications of infection, uterine infection, they are based on the severity, the extent, the characteristics of inflammatory reactions, and number of days since calving. We have already seen in the very third slide of my presentation, the red one area, the metritis zone, the endometritis zone, and the endometritis, subclinical endometritis zone. So classification is based on severity, extent, inflammatory reactions, and time since calving, the days which left. Inflammation of uterus and the entire wall is metritis. 1 to 2 weeks postpartum, this condition is seen. The severe form is also known as toxic metritis, puerperal metritis. Toxic metritis, you have heated odor, and this happens when you see a animal suffering with dystopia. This happens when animal is having a retention of placenta and not being properly treated. Then this will come with these conditions. Less severe form is said to be metritis or acute postpartum metritis or even the puerperal metritis. These are the terms given. Characterized by the toxic metritis is characterized by, or the puerperal metritis is characterized by watery brown discharge. There is always a systemic illness. Animal will go with off feed. There is dehydration. The animal will febrile. Temperature will rise. Depressed. If you go for a transrectal palpations, you find a large uterus. I will not advise anyone. This is just for purpose of a study that we say yes. But if an animal is suffering with a puerperal metritis, toxic metritis, don't need to evaluate it by per rectal examination. But the per rectal finding will be that you have a large uterus, absence of longitudinal ridge, rugae, which is an indications that animal is not tonic. Finding similar to uterus undergoing involution. Acute postpartum or puerperal metritis, there is no systemic signs. Animal take less feed, produce less milk, more likely to be culled because they will not conceive. With the passage of time will return to endometritis. This is the faith that a metritis, a puerperal metritis, a toxic metritis may undergo in the subsequent times to come into endometritis, will subsequently go into a subclinical endometritis. Endometritis. Only the inflammation of endometrium, there is disruption of the epithelium, endometrial epithelium. And when you have a disruption of epitheliums or when some inflammatory process is there in the endometrium, what will affect? It will not conceive. Whatever the fertilized egg which comes into the uterus, when they go for the attachment period, they will not, because of this problem. Influx of inflammatory cells, mainly neutrophils is there, lymphocytes are also there, and they are being categorized as clinical endometritis and subclinical metritis. Whenever there is a uterine inflammations, defense systems, the main defense cell is the neutrophils which will come. Then clinical endometritis is visible conditions. Maybe purulent or mucopurulent discharge will be present. Discharge is either visible. If the amount is so much, it will be visible. Or even when the animal comes in estrus and it is suffering with a clinical endometritis, whatever the secretions of estrus, they will bring that infection outside and you will find that there is a mucopurulent type of discharge. But what will happen if the amount is less? They will just concise around the fornix of the vagina, fornix of the cervix, and you are not able to visualize it. Animal comes in estrus, reported on it, you just inseminate, and you then say, okay, conception rates are weak. Subclinical endometritis, this is also called as cytological endometritis. इसको यहीं पर क्लियर कर दिया गया. Cytological endometritis means you don't have any other means to observe, just observe the cytological evidence of inflammation in the material collected from the uterus. Then you will able to say, yes, this is subclinical endometritis. There is no visible discharge, inflammation, infection persists. Significant inflammatory cells also present. Significant inflammatory cells which is present is neutrophils. And the status of neutrophils, you find in subclinical endometritis, neutrophils will be very high. Then followed in normal involutions because they are going on side and side. And then the clinical endometritis. Pyometra is again a clinical endometritis case or a subclinical form of endometritis. If they ovulate, infection is still there. If they ovulate, the corpus luteum will form. Okay, whatever the substances inside the is being secreted by the pathogen, they interfere in the process of prostaglandin synthesis. There will be a persistency of the corpus luteum. And you say that, yes, accumulation of the pus in the uterus with presence of a CL in the ovum, with a flaccid uterus, closed cervix, and this may go for indefinite period. Even if you see, what is the diagnosis of this? People will say, sir, the animal is not coming in estrus. And when you go for a rectal examination, you find that uterus is enlarged, but it is not giving you a feeling of pregnancy. Then your mind will say, okay, now this is nothing but the condition of a pyometra. You have to clearly distinguish between pregnancy and pyometra. Immunodeficiency is there. Prolongation of luteal phase is common because once the infection is inside, prostaglandin synthesis is hampered, and therefore the lysis of corpus luteum do not take place, and there is prolongation of the luteal. And that is what we the people says that there is prostaglandin E synthesis and not F2 alpha, which is being responsible for lysis of corpus luteum. If ovulation occurs in infections, then definitely this leads to pyometra, and therefore induced pyometra. Induced pyometra. People creates induced pyometra. What do you say? You must have heard that many people in a big dairy farms, they or in, if you say with the developed bird technologies of reproductive management, developed bird technology of reproductive management, they, if I had in my mind, yes, okay, the early postpartum period is vulnerable for infection. This I know. Okay, we also know this fact that yes, there is deficiency of the pulse of GnRH, and there is also a deficiency of LH in the system. So definitely the early postpartum period may give rise to a condition of cystic condition. So in order to avoid cystic conditions, many dairy farms, they just go with the process of giving a GnRH injection in the 3rd week postpartum, so as to avoid, so as to go a process of ovulation. And they are, if they are not following a prostaglandin infection, if they are not sure that how clean their animal are, then they must be trapped into the system of pyometra. So इसीलिए जरूरी है कि whenever you are giving a GnRH injection, those industry people, those dairy owners who are aware of the things and are in this in the reproductive efficiency treatment of a GnRH on the 3rd week, in the 3rd week postpartum, and if they don't give a prostaglandin subsequently, prostaglandin you can give it 7 days later, you can give it 10 days later, you can give it 11 days later, but it has to be followed, because you may also have a risk. This corpus luteum which will form, you may have ovulated a follicle with the GnRH, but that follicles which has ovulated because of some infection may trapped into the process of persistency of the CLs, leading to a corpus leading to a pyometra case. Okay, so this is a tip also for those who are in practice of this. These are the different categories of infections which you grade. mucus clear, mucopurulent, just see with your own eyes, you can even evaluate it. Bloody discharge, these are all the different category, different scores, which has been followed by Sheldon's. This is actually from Sheldon's uh, Sheldon's work. Now, how to diagnose it? Metritis, no need for any much diagnosis. You have either a history. Discharge will be giving you an enough idea, but you should have a clear in mind what is a lochia discharge and what is an infective discharge. A lochial discharge will never have a fetid odor. Okay, they may have flakes, and don't confuse. But if you have a metritis, it will have a fetid odor. You have a systemic times which is not present in lochia, because these two periods are running simultaneously. If it is going on normally, it is a lochial discharge. If it is going on abnormally, it is a metritis case. Transrectal examination means if person has, I will not advise that we should go with metritis, but just for those who wants to compare a case of metritis, then they must have a clear idea of how the involution takes place and how they can judge the process of involution by their hand. Okay. These are other factors, means if you are associated with the conditions of ketosis, abomasal displacement, then you may have a metritis there. Uterine infection, position of uterus, enlargement of uterus, asymmetry in the horns, endometrial thickening, palpable uterine thickness, all these parameters are not associated with transrectal examination. Does not give you any clue except that yes, it is enlarged, and these are not being related with pregnancies. We have gone to endometritis now. Endometritis, metritis, no problem. Metritis, we don't have any problem. It is obvious. You have some systemic signs, or if you don't have a systemic signs, then you have a fetid odor also present in the discharge, and discharge is altogether different from that what is present in the normal. Endometritis, you can go. We are on the diagnostic approach, and if there is an endometritis, you can go with the transrectal uterine examinations for position of uterus, the enlargement. And earlier people, they used to do it. They used to do it, but they are not very much conclusive in terms of how you can correlate it with the fertility. These parameters are not very reliable, and they are all subjective things. Okay, so we may miss many of the cases, and that is why this transrectal approach is an old one. If we say culture the uterus and find the infective organism, this is also not possible. Practically in field conditions, this is also not possible. Okay, then uterine biopsy. If I say you do uterine biopsy, you also do not, you will not able to do it. Even I at my own end cannot able to do it. Okay, in a routine business. Plus, moreover, the biopsy is a invasive process, and people have said that yes, if there is a biopsy examinations going on, then you have to go with the two examination, collect two samples in order to compare the things, and moreover, it is almost a futile style. What is the need of the hour is that you have a diagnostic system which will not be inexpensive, which will give you a clear and quick results, and which is very much correlated with the fertility aspect and has been proven. So biopsy also does not work. Vaginoscopy, this can be done. This can be done. Okay, but again, if you go with a speculum approach, then sterilization of a speculum is also a problem. But anyway, we will go ahead with the other diagnostic stuff, but this is good. If it is a subclinical, if it is a clinical endometritis with this scanty of secretions, where the secretion is lodged just near the fornix of the cervix. Okay, and this will give you the type of nature of the discharge present there, because they are coming directly from the uterus and give you a clear idea. Yes, This is a discharge which is coming out from the uterus, and this discharge is not proper. This is either a mucopurulent or a purulent one with less in amount, and is not visible from outside. Okay, otherwise they are visible, just soiling the tail, soiling the vulva. Okay. Pathogen organism, if they are present, you may have a foul smelling. Other uterine pathogens, opportunistic pathogens are associated with the. It is best that you should, if one have to go for vaginoscopic examinations, then follow at least 30 days postpartum, because in the first 21 days you have your involution period going on, and you may even have a confusion there. So in order to avoid the false positiveness, you go with the vaginoscopy examinations after 30 days. Vaginal examination using gloved hand. This is very easy. Just have a gloved hand, insert your hand inside it, and take out the discharge around the cervix and just see if it is what type of nature. But again, the problem is that some people may have a fear, my clothes will soil, and you have to make a dress up. This is also a constraint, which I also feel. Then some people, they have a large hand. Even the owners, they do not allow some. Okay, you don't go with a vaginal examination. So under that conditions, what is the options left? So vaginal examination using a gloved hand is an approach for diagnosis of clinical endometritis, but with hesitations, it is there. It is there. It can give you results. So those who can find it fit, they can also go, taking all precautions. This is just from cervix, the oozing out of the purulent discharge, which is not visible outside. And this is a clear discharge which is present near the cervix. So this vaginoscopy is a good approach in diagnosing the cases of clinical endometritis. Then people have devised metric check like instrument. This is nothing but a steel rod with a cup in front, and this is just facilitating to take out the discharge around the cervix, and you don't have to exert much also. So easy to handle is there, and has got a high cost effective way, and this has got a high correlation with fertility. But again, this thing is to be noted that all these things which we are discussing, they are the cases for clinical endometritis and not a subclinical one, not a subclinical one. So this is nothing but metric check. Many of you must have. Many companies have given these things free of cost to many veterinarians. And this is nothing, you just push it as you pass a gun, and then this cup holders will bring out the type of discharge present there, and you can evaluate the nature of discharge if you have any doubt, or if you want to do a regular check of your animals. Cytological endometritis or the subclinical endometritis, they can only be checked by a cytological examination. And they are the cytological evidence of inflammation. The cytological evidence of inflammation is that you will find presence of neutrophils in the system. You find presence of neutrophils in the system. Okay, there are two ways by which you can do it. Make a uterine lavage, and the other is a cytobrush technology. Uterine lavage is as simple as doing an AI. The only thing is that you have to use an additional sheet in order so that you cannot carry an infection inside the uterus. Okay, so those who are engaged with the embryo transfer things, or those when we say even in pneumovagina, in urovagina cases, then we also have applied a sheet. This is easily available in our country. Many companies, they are selling it. Take just the same way when you prepared a AI gun, you have to just put a additional sheet, and this additional sheet will only be perforated when you are entering into the cervix, so that you can avoid carrying of infection inside the uterus. Saline is used. It's simple AI things. Okay, you push a saline inside it. You just massage the organs, aspirate the fluid back, and whatever the cellular debris, the fluid is centrifuge. If you don't centrifuge, even you can keep the you can keep the tube with the stand for hardly 20 minutes. You will have a settled cells in the bottom. You just spoil the supernatant and take out the cells and prepare a smear as you prepare for. Air dry it, make it with Giemsa strains, and count neutrophils in 100 cells. In a smear, you will find the endometrial cells as well as the neutrophils. Okay, and you count 100 cells, and what is the threshold limit when you declare that yes, this is a case? We will discuss it. Advantage is that this is a readily available material which is being used, and disadvantage is that in many of the times you may not able to collect fluid from the uterus, and in certain cases you will find that there is a loss in the cell definition. They are not into that way which we are. Then other is a cytobrush technology. There are two things which has been employed for cytological evidence of endometritis, subclinical endometritis. Mind it, this is very great problem. Even people say 80% cases are in subclinical endometritis in the first 80 days, first 70 days, first 60 days. This is the systems. Cytobrush is nothing but a steel rod, and it is just like an AI gun. In other words, I can say it is just like an AI gun. If it is visible to you, I have also made a picture there. It is just like an AI gun with a plunger in it, and you just have a brush which you have to apply it. Brush. The system is this thing is present in India, and even one of my assistant professor, he brought these things when he was on a training to Gadwasu. So in Ludhiana they are selling it. There are certain people who are selling it. So this is a very good thing, because you just have to pass a brush like the way you pass a gun. Brush is concealed inside the tube, and you have to open the brush only when you reach into the uterus, and not depth into the uterus. Just when you cross the internal os, just push it. The brush will come out, hardly 3 centimeter long brush will come out, and then you just have to rotate this brush around the body of the uterus. Take it back, push it back into the tubes of the concealed apparatus which is with this, and then you take it out and roll it on a slide and dry it in the air, and go with the Giemsa stains or any of these stains which is fit for cells. You may find the things of you may find the neutrophils if it is with a case of subclinical endometritis. So this is nothing but a descriptions of how does this work, and you can easily understand while we show you the picture. The threshold limit is greater than 18%. 18% means you count 100 cells, 100 plus cells, and if you find that the neutrophils percentage, they are more than 18%, then you will say yes, this is a case of subclinical endometritis. Highly correlated with pregnancy, and specificity is high. Advantage is that you don't need a centrifugation, and disadvantage is some people say yeah, it is collected only from the body, but this has very high correlations with fertility as per the literatures which are available. This is what Sheldon proposed, the person who has done a lot of work on uterine health. And they proposed that if you are examining it at 20 to 33 days postpartum, then it should be greater than 18%, the cell should be 18%. If you are going with 49 days, then it should be less than 10%. If you are going beyond this period, then it is 5%. This picture itself says that as the process goes on, as the days passes on, there is a slow evacuation, or the number of cycle passes, there is an auto recovery, there is a spontaneous recovery. But again, the factor is that we cannot tolerate to give so much time to remain animal non-pregnant because it cost us a lot in terms of feeding. These are the endometrial cells which are being stained, and you see the polymorphic nuclear cells, the neutrophils which are there, and you just can count because you have already gone with the procedures of staining blood smear also. In a similar way, you can do it. So if you count the 100 cells, and if in the 100 cells you find that there are 15%, as the case may be, on what day of postpartum period you are examining, follow Sheldon's method. Follow Sheldon's method. If it is above 50 days postpartum, it should be greater than 5%. This is what is a cytobrush. This is nothing but a stainless steel tube, and inside it is a plunger, and this is the tip of the plunger, and this is the brush which we use to cut it and fix it at the anterior end, and we just withdraw the brush inside it and apply a sheet over it, and then we will pass it into the body of the uterus as we do it here. This is again a separate view of the shield as well as the plunger. This is again the more clear pictures. The brush is being loaded on a piston or a plunger, and this is the shield, and this is the shield, and this is the type of brush. They have a screw type of brush. We don't have a screw type of brush. We just by putting a pressure over it, it just fix it into the system. Then sonography. Sonography is that if you find a lumen, you find fluid in the lumen. Very easy things, nothing to exert. But the problem is that it also do not give you a clear opinion about the subclinical endometritis. Okay. People used to go with measuring the diameter. Even in the initial stages, we have also done this, but it remains inconclusive in our system also that we cannot correlate endometrial thickness, uterine lumen with pregnancies, and therefore ultrasonography will only help you in detecting a lumen, and in the lumen if there is a fluid present, because it will only detect when there is a lumen, when there is a fluid inside it. Then this indicates yes, already there is an infection inside. So USG is helpful for diagnosis about some of the cases of endometritis, but not all endometritis cases. They can diagnose both clinical as well as the subclinical one, but not subclinical to the extent unless there is a presence of lumen. There are other methods of detecting the subclinical endometritis, and the subclinical endometritis, the other method is that whatever the flush, the lavage which you did in the clinical endometritis case or the subclinical endometritis case, okay, you just take out the supernatant and go with a OD reading. People have standardized this thing that in conditions of infections, the OD is such. So we can also say an optical density is directly this systems who worked on one who has go with the system of measuring the optical density, he can easily say the more is the turbidity in this solution, the higher will be the optical density, and higher will be the optical density, then you can say yes, this is a problem of endometritis. So even one can employ, even those who are in the teaching platforms, they can use. Everybody has optical measurement of optical density. Then pyometra, they are routinely examines for as an anistros cases. They are being presented as an anistros cases, and when you go for examination, then you say, okay, this is nothing but a pregnancy. This is nothing but a pyometra, a enlarged uterus with ACL, no feeling of pregnancy. Always correlate pyometra with a pregnancy. You don't have a positive signs of pregnancy. You don't have a fetus. You don't have a fetal membrane slip. You don't have a fetal membrane. And this gives you a very clear indications, yes. And plus, those persons who are in regular habit of doing rectal examination, even the day they will find a pyometra case, their hand will sense differently. and they will immediately say, yes, this is not abnormal. This is not normal. This is something abnormal, and they can correlate it. Sonography, uterine fluid can be visualized, differentiate between ultrasound for pyometra cases is very good. It is a very easy way to detect fetus hai ya nahi hai. And the echo texture, how much echo texture is there in the fluid. So that can be drawn out, and even you can analyze a CL very well. Just see the type of echo texture. Here you have some black areas, a little of white, but here you have all a blackishness is less, and you have a mixed echo texture, or not a mixed echo texture, but even a hyperechoic type of, not exactly hyperechoic. And this is a clear fluid, and this is a clear fluid. Now switch over to the treatment. Metritis. For metritis, what we do is that we should go with supportive therapy. Those cases which show systemic signs, go with the supportive therapy, go with the anti-inflammatory, not directly going into antibiotic. Antibiotic will not do anything. At that place, when you have systemic signs, then we have to approach first for removal of toxins. In terms of fluid therapy, you go with anti-inflammatory drugs that will work, and in 1 or 2 days you will find that you are able to achieve. My concept is that I used to even narrate with my students, don't waste money on antibiotic, because this is a case which required a supportive treatment first. You go with the supportive therapy. You go with the supportive therapy because we know the pocket of the owner also. So the things which help them most is that a supportive therapy, which will help in evacuation of the evacuation for the toxins. Okay, and simultaneously anti-inflammatory drugs. Just do it for 2-3 days, and you will find a tremendous improvement in those cases of metritis or a puerperal metritis, where you find that there is a fetal discharge, there is systemic illness out there. You can also go with antibiotic, but always use it systematically. Don't use it intrauterine. We are always in habit of giving intrauterine. Okay, we are in a thought that okay, whatever we put it inside the uterus, this will work better as compared to a systemic one. It will directly hit, but it does not happen. So let us see. Systemic, whatever the antibiotic which you give, systemic, parenteral route, it will distribute to all layers, because the infections from the lumen of the uterus, from the endometrium, they have breached inside. Okay, and it is less harmful to uterus. Whatever you insufflate into the uterus, or whatever you infuse into the uterus, this will have a negative impact also, because there are many drugs which causes necrosis. There are many drugs which causes, and the biggest problem is this: we are using all those drugs which are not recommended for intrauterine, and we are putting into the intrauterine system without knowing it. Yes, okay, ठीक है, हमें रिजल्ट मिल गया, और हम भी कहते हैं रिजल्ट मिल गया, क्यों? क्योंकि डिस्चार्ज क्लियर हो जाता है, डिस्चार्ज क्लियर हो जाता है, अंदर की हालत हम नहीं जानते. Okay, and if the necrosis is there inside the endometrium, then you have a lost case. The preferred choice, systemic antibiotic, penicillin. Penicillin has got the power of distributing all the layers. The concentration is in front of you. People used to follow this, okay, and follow it for 3 to 5 days. Procaine, penicillin. Ceftiofur is being used as sodium salt as well as hydrochloride, and the dose is 1 milligram per body weight, and they are using it for 3 to 5 days. The thing is that the minimum inhibitory concentrations which we reached with this drug is far above than what is required for a pathogenic organism. The most pathogenic organism, Trupperella, Fusiform necrophorum, E. coli, and whatever the minimum inhibitory concentration which you received with Ceftiofur is quite high, almost 4 times higher as compared to what is desired for. So this will work. And in cases of puerperal metritis, acute type, you can increase the dose also. You can increase the dose. In less effective conditions, you can go with this salt. So even the salts to salts, they vary. So this much of things is there. Oxytetracycline is also being used. These are all parenteral antibiotic therapy which we are saying, all either intramuscularly or subcutaneously. Okay, the problem is that this is often often in big use, oxytetracycline, and the minimum inhibitory condition is 20.4 micrograms, whereas what we receive is a 5 microgram level. So this is not at all a very effective one, but it will give you some sign, it will give you some cure, but it will not be a good choice. It will not be a good choice. Then intrauterine infusion. Amongst the intrauterine infusions, we have and they are being done to remove the harmful bacteria, should have no damaging effect on the uterus and do not impair the uterine defense system. This intention intrauterine therapy is being done, but the problem is that they interfere in the process. Iodine is being popularly used, povidone even the LUGO iodine, people use it without knowing the concentration and without having a proper dilution, they are using it. 50 to 100 ml of povidone is being used, and advise always to use it after the 30 days postpartum. Okay. Detrimental effect on fertility compared to non-treated effect. This is the thing, that if you are using povidone, even polyvinyl pyrrolidine, okay, then you have a detrimental effect on fertility compared to non-treated animals. If you leave it as such, then they will even cure. The only thing is that you may have a cure in terms of a discharge which is quickly vanished out, and people say, okay, recovery ho gaya hai bhai. People even used dextrose, concentrated dextrose. It is not at all effective. Penicillin group of drugs is also used as intrauterine. In the early postpartum period, beta lactamase is there, and no need. It is not at all effective. Tetracycline, it is drug of choice. It is drug of choice. Even I used in my earlier days when I have read cow manual from Society of Therogeninology. Then they also say that by the preferred choice is tetracycline, because it is very effective in the condition of pus. And of course, it is also clearly visible that you give in tetracycline, intrauterine, and you will find this third day you will have all the things cover up. This much effective, but the only thing is that they can cause, they impair the defense systems, and they may even have a necrotic effect. Prostaglandin, if anybody use it as intrauterine, it will not have any effect. Okay, because you know how does a prostaglandin work. So if you are insufflating it into the uterus, it do not have any effect. But we have seen, and even a report suggests that people are using just to have an ecbolic actions. Even for ecbolic actions, people use oxytocin, and oxytocin three times this much of international unit per day. If you do, it do not have any benefit effect. So even the estrogens, people say, okay, you just increase the vascularity there, it will work. No, it will not have any benefit effect at all. So we have to avoid this thing. Then comes the endometritis. And for endometritis, we have dealt with metritis, the early postpartum period, the problems of metritis. You have to go with supportive therapy. You have to go with antibiotic, then prefer it systematically, not go in for intrauterine therapy. If you have to go intrauterine therapy, then the choice is in front of you, that of course you do with this. Majority of the intrauterine therapy in the early postpartum period, they don't work. Then endometritis, the choice are two things, either a prostaglandin or an intrauterine. Prostaglandin is just based on the fact that it will cause a lysis, because we usually find endometritis after day 30 when you have a follicular status active and you may even have a CL present in the systems, which will not be able to help by the uterine prostaglandin. Now, so prostaglandin is just to bring the progesterone concentration, and it will also stimulate the uterine difference. Intrauterine infusions are that to achieve greater concentration of drug at the site, and it is not possible with systemic therapy. Whatever the systemic therapy say hum nahi de sakte, that we can do it with intrauterine, but only in the cases of endometritis, not in puerperal, not in metritis case, not in metritis case. Even people use synchronization protocols. Those who want a targeted breeding practice in their system as reproductive management tool, they used to go with a pre-synchronization protocol with prostaglandin. And they say, yes, they have a good results. And this supports the opinion that prostaglandin works, and proper prostaglandin is helpful in treating the cases of endometritis and in treating the cases of pregnancy, because it brings down the progesterone level down. It also goes a vascular nature of cycles. Or if you have an early breakdown of your cyclicity, 21 days cycles, if you just give it 10 days apart, then you would also have a curing system by itself. Significant increase in conception results have been reported. When to begin prostaglandin treatment? Always prefer it after a month. More likely presence of a luteal tissues. You know, the dose of prostaglandin, propranolol is very much popular, and this is nowadays being more practiced, and 500 microgram is the dose. Even in cases of pyometra, we used to follow 2 doses of prostaglandin as 12 hours interval. Intrauterine infusion. Intrauterine infusion. Sorry. Intrauterine infusions in the cases of endometritis. Oxytetracycline. It has got a poor absorptions, do not reach to the deeper layer. So if the infection, they have percolated down into the uterus and they have come into the systemic route, then it becomes a problem. So what we do in our older days times, that okay, you go with you go with attack on both the sides, make it parenteral as well as make it intrauterine also. So that infection which reaches into the systemic system, into the blood vascular system, then they can be taken off by the systemic antibiotic therapy, whereas those which are present inside, they will be taken up by the intrauterine therapy. Infusion treatment at time of AI and post AI, they have been practiced very much, they have been popularized very much, but again, they are adversely related to conceptions because there is an endometrial inflammation, and that cannot be coped up. So any attempt, even earlier, if paper you study, then they say, but these are all the things which has come up in the last 7-8 years. Yes, you should not go with these things. So in AI, with AI, it's not of benefit. Or even the post AI, if you are going for a intrauterine infusion, it will not be of much use. Cefaparin is being used as an intrauterine, more conception than control or prostaglandin treated. So this itself proves that in cases of endometritis, you can prefer intrauterine is much more beneficial even as compared to PG. Ceftiofur hydrochloride is the cephalosporins, the different cephalosporins. People says that this salt is not working good, and yes, there are reports which suggest that okay, hydrochloride is not working well with intrauterine therapy. Pyometra, you can go. The only sure thing is that you can go with prostaglandin. You have a result. Next in 24 hours, you have a estrus. Don't go with insemination in the estrus. Wait for next cycle even. Not go into the induced estrus insemination. Not go into even the next cycle insemination. And then you can. So I hope it is too exhaustive. I tried to cover it. The things which I think is important for you all. And with this, I finishes my talk and I hand it over to Dr. Santosh.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
sir.
very much, Doctor.
Yes, sir, please.
Santosh, you carry on.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And now
Yeah.
I will invite Amit, Dr. Naresh Kulkarni and Karunanidhi sir to take question and answer session before
Yeah,
we
no
proceed
problem.
to the vote of thanks.
Okay, sir. Yeah, there are so many questions, but we have shortlisted some of them. We'll be getting back the answers from you, sir, in depth for each and every question. But for the time being, we'll be taking few questions.
Yeah.
Like there is question from Dr. Vishnu Narwade that how to diagnose subclinical endometritis at field level, and what would be the role of this white side test in the field level, or the utility of this test in the field?
White side test actually is not very conclusive, and it's not very correlated with the fertility status. Okay, so what is at field level is that you can go with a uterine lavage, because all the things are available with you. You have a pipette, you have a gun, you have even a sleeve. If not there, you can buy it, and you just take it out. Saline is with you. You just insufflate it, massage it, take it out, and just stand it. I know in field you don't have a centrifuge. That is why he said you just keep it. You just keep it for 20 minutes in the lab, and then you throw out the supernatant and whatever the cells which are present in there, you just go. This is a very quick test and very easy test. Very easy test. There is nothing, and this is highly correlated with pregnancy. Okay, instead of going for a white test, for white test you required an NaOH, you required a test tube. Okay, then you start to you should also have a spirit lamp with you. So why don't you go with this thing which is highly correlated with the pregnancies, and you may have a confidence in technology after you started using it.
Yes, sir. So the next question was pertaining to this only, sir, that uterine lavage. So that I hope that you have answered both the questions from Dr. Bilal and Dr. Vishnu as well. There is one more question, sir, that what is the best treatment protocol for retention of placenta cases by Dr. Virender?
See, this is a topic which should which should come first with uterine infection, but this is a misconception. A very good question, I can say. This is a misconception. We don't want to treat a retention of placenta. You don't want to push it out, whatsoever is the conditions. Okay, the only way the only treatment suggested for retention placenta is not for retention of placenta, but they are for the subsequent problems, the metritis, the endometritis. Okay, so go for a Google search, have lots of literatures where everyone says, and even I says, yes, you don't require it. And what is that? What for treatment, best treatment for retention of placenta? What we want, that the placenta should be out. The present concept, or concept which has been from the last even 15 years, that don't take it out placenta by your own hands. Don't take it out. But the problem is that जब मेरे पास ये क्वेश्चन आता है तो I said okay, you don't go with immediate removal of placenta by just inserting your hand and taking it out. But people will say, sir, हमारा faith कम हो जाएगा field में. The other person will take our case. This is also there. तो अब उस समय हम भी क्या करते हैं, फिर चुप हो जाना पड़ता है हमें, जो कि ये गलत है. हम अपनी तरफ से बोलते हैं कि yes, the retention of placenta does not means even no insufflation, no intrauterine infusion of any antibiotic, because the best way is let the placenta to putrefy. Let the placenta to putrefy. Insert your hand or whatever the placenta is present in the vagina. If there is ethical issues, you cut the placenta which is hanging. Let it into the vagina. Let it inside the vagina, let it go for a putrefaction process. After 3 days, you take it out. It will easily, it will easily come out. You attempt to try a case of retention of placenta in premature birth, in a case of dystocia, in a prolonged gestation, it is difficult. It is difficult to get relief of placenta. And you are causing a great damage to the endometrium of the uterus. So always the best books, the best literature, the best literature available on these issues is no, you should not go for removal. You let them stay inside, get them putrefied, and then subsequently, if you find that yes, of course, you have a off-fit condition, go with the systematic antibiotic therapy. Go with the parenteral infusion of fluid therapy. That you can do.
Okay, sir. I hope that you have given the satisfied the question which was been raised by Dr. Virender as well. So there is one more question that how to treat this mucometra in cattle by Dr. Kaushal Prajapati.
Mucometra, again, this we have not taken it, but mucometra, see, these are very little case. The first thing is, if you are able to diagnose a mucometra, then I think you can easily handle each and everything. You can easily handle each and everything. Even a chronic cases of pyometra, once being treated with prostaglandin, is to go with a intrauterine therapy, what we have said. The same you can do it for mucometra, and we are practicing it for. It is a thick one. You can only lavage the uterus. That is the best with saline, with the lukewarm saline. That is the best answer.
Sir, there were questions regarding the hormonal therapy and all, which you have covered in your points and all. So I hope you have given a knowledgeable and practical approach in the field to tackle this uterine infections and all. Thank you very much, sir.
My only concern was that we should inculcate in the mind of our professional colleagues that we should move ahead with what we are practicing, because all those things do not last long. We have to update our knowledge, and this is a platform where you said continuous veterinary education program. Education is a continuous process. If you don't go with the continuous process, then we will face problem, and that will not be good for our profession, what I feel.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for answering all the questions from the field veterinarians as such.
If you even receive more questions, you just
yes, sir.
mail
I have it. Yes, sir.
You just mail it to me. I will try to satisfy.
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir. Definitely, I'll mail it to you, sir.
But yes, not in up to 50th. We are very much packed.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
So don't expect in solo.
No, sir. No. We know the sir that in a busy schedule you have given us the time. Over to Karunanidhi sir and Dr. Santosh sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable presentation and the practical application of the knowledge. It will be, I think, it will be a great help for the field veterinarians in handling such cases, particularly uterine infections and treatment. In our discussions with BMT, we used to say the animal is having few organs which are very, very important. If this organ or if this system functions correctly, the farmer will be very, very comfortable. That is rumen, uterus, udder. So these are all the systems, we call it very economically very, very important systems in large animals. So thanks for the nice presentation, sir. Over to Dr. Santosh.
Thank you very much, sir. I will proceed with the vote of thanks, sir. Very warm and graceful evening to our Honorable Atul Saxena, sir, and all the participants. It is my privilege to propose vote of thanks speech to acknowledge the contribution of those who work very really hard to make this webinar successful. Sir, on behalf of all the participants, Alembic Pharmaceutical Limited, myself, Dr. Santosh Shinde, express my sincere gratitude to Atul Saxena, sir, for such an informative and applied presentation on post-partural uterine infection. Sir, your presentation will definitely going to help all the participating veterinarians, students, faculty for diagnosis and treatment of the post-parturient disease, especially in both, sir, clinical as well as subclinical stage. In future also, sir, we will take benefit of such a interesting and useful session so that we will enhance our knowledge and we can serve the society. I would like to thank Dr. Mukesh Kumar Srivastav for making this webinar successful. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the participating veterinarians, Alembic field staff for making this webinar successful. Thank you once again, Honorable Dr. Atul Saxena sir, for sparing us time for the webinar. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. And I'm grateful to Alembic that
Thank
they
you,
have
sir.
given me this platform to interact with my so many colleagues, so many students who are working in the field, and I hope they will be benefited with this presentation. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.